honor of this gentleman, please?
Yes.
Come on.
Woo! Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Did Jimmy wear out the battery? Are we good? All right. Jimmy, you don't have to run off. We've known each other for a long time. Anyway, it's good to see so many of you here. I really don't know what to say. The week in Miami was the highlight of my career. It really was. It's very emotional. Anybody that's read my book knows the background story of my departure when I worked for the company with Vince, and it was rocky to say the least. And I resigned and left before a lot of people thought I was crazy because I was where everybody wanted to be. And some things happened, and I talked about my book. But also, in fairness, even then, in 2005, when I wrote the book, I was out of the business. I had no axe to grind with anybody. I had no agenda. And I think I was really objective and realized how much I learned from being around Vince and the opportunities that he gave me, and just to grow professionally even at that late stage of my career. And I hadn't been to a WrestleMania in 16 years. And so as amazing as the Hall of Fame ceremony was, when you walk out on the stage in front of 78,000, 75, whatever the number was, I'll just tell you, a lot of people. And to get a response like that, and to be acknowledged in front of that crowd, and just to be part of what, at least as of today, is the record-breaking WrestleMania, that's a big deal too. And the one thing that I've talked about in a couple of interviews that I've done that really wasn't a part of it was as special as Saturday night was with the Hall of Fame ceremony, standing on the stage, and you see Stephanie, you see Linda McMahon, there's John Cena, CM Punk, Randy Orton, the stars of today, and then you see Roddy Piper and a Sergeant Slaughter and a Ted DiBiase and Dory Funk Jr. and all the legends, and then your family mixed in with them. And then when they announce you, all of these people stand and applaud, and 16,000 other people in a sold-out thing too. And talk about goosebump moments. I've had a few in my career, and hard to top that. But the next day, they said, with the stadium, they're going to get a big crowd, and everybody needs to be in the green room in the hotel over there at 4 o'clock. And my son's in a wheelchair, so they had a private vehicle for us. And I was under the impression there might be 2-3 buses. That's somehow what I had heard that number. So at 4 o'clock, it just seemed like, just people everywhere. And we went out and got in the SUV, my 3 daughters, my son, and I, and the driver, and so that we would be ready and not hold things up. And there were police everywhere. The buses started pulling up. It was wrestlers. It was talent that had been there for access and Hall of Fame and other things that weren't actually involved in the WrestleMania event itself. Their families, their friends, guests. Well, one bus became 2 buses, became 3 buses, and when they were done, there were 7 busloads of people. I'm talking about like Greyhound buses. I'm not talking about a little courtesy van like brings you from the airport. 7 busloads of people. And once they all got lined up out on the street, we were behind them, and there was one SUV behind us. And when they got ready to go, they blocked off all the streets in downtown Miami, from the hotel Once we started, we went through red lights nonstop, right over to Interstate 95. And as we get to Interstate 95, the police had the highway blocked off, all the traffic. We zip up on the highway, and it's probably a 20-minute ride out to where the stadium is. And as we come up to every on-ramp, there's a motorcycle cop with lights flashing that has all the traffic backed up. We were the only ones on the highway on the north side of Interstate 95 for that 20-minute ride out to the stadium. And every now and then, we'd go in a curve, and we're in the back, and I could see this snake of 7 buses with us in the back, and right into the parking lot, and right into the stadium. I'd never seen anything so well coordinated. There were cops in front, cops behind, motorcycles on both sides, flying all in and out. And this wasn't even part of what was going on for that weekend. So it was very special for me on a lot of levels. And I said it's kind of like the cherry on top of my personal ice cream sundae. I mean, it just, where else are you going to go? It just was, you know, there are people, in interviews I've often been asked, you know, I mean, do I agree with every decision that's ever? Absolutely not. And there have been bookers that I worked for, promoters that I respected, who made decisions that I didn't agree with either. That's the nature of the business. And Pat Patterson said it best. He said, you know, not everybody likes the same flavor of ice cream. Sometimes some like chocolate, some like vanilla, and it's all delicious, but just people have different favorite flavors. And that's kind of how the wrestling business is. And what Eddie Graham did in Florida with Jack Briscoe, with respectability and credibility for a collegiate champion, and doing great business, because that's what the people were educated to. And here's Gordon Soley calling each match like it was a collegiate match. And yet you go up the road to Tennessee, and it was hell's bells up there, balls to the wall. You know, they were doing everything crazy in the world and doing phenomenal business too. So there's no right way, there's no wrong way. It just is, everybody had their own way, and of course cable television changed all that. So I often wonder, Vince McMahon had a vision, pursued it, and you cannot argue with success. And boy, that hit me right in the face at WrestleMania when you walk out there, and you know, the opening, they counted down the opening music, and I'd heard there was going to be a flyover, and I was standing in the Marlins dugout, and as the song wound down, there was a Air National Guardsman there. I said, "Where's the flyover coming from?" "Oh, I don't know flyover. They wouldn't have that here." I said, "Oh, okay." So I'm looking anyway, and sure enough, here are these two jets that for me, were incredibly low. I mean, it wasn't like they were going to hit anything, but they were low, and had their afterburners. And I saw them and shoot over the stadium, and right about the time they had gone across the stadium, the boom hit. And it was so loud, I watched them go by, and I ducked. I thought, I'm looking around to see if anybody saw me duck. I felt kind of stupid, but you know, with the fireworks and the aerial shots. And when we were over there for a walkthrough earlier, there was some cameramen that worked the show. And somebody said, you know, what's this like compared to all the other stuff? They said, we work everything in this town. We work the Super Bowls, and they said, really, the Super Bowl is a 20-minute concert in the middle of a football game. And this thing will be 3.5+ hours of just solid, non-stop entertainment like nothing else, and there's no show that can compare to this. And I think that said it well. It was that, and all year you see a lot of the quote-unquote sports entertainment with the television product, and I figured out that that's the way it has to be, because you don't have the depth of talent in the profession anymore. So they have so many hours of programming to fill, and so you get a lot of, I mean, the thought of coming on the air and somebody going to the ring and talking for 20 or 25 minutes and never having that bell ring in any action would have horrified. Eddie Graham would turn over in his grave if somebody talked about that happening one time, let alone pretty much every week. But, you know, that's what they got to do, and that's what the people are educated to. But when it came time to the big event, where those people were there, and Dusty said it well at the Hall of Fame induction, this was professional wrestling. This was old school, and this is what you saw, basically nonstop, as good as it gets. And again, you can't argue with success. So anyway, I don't want to stand up here and talk forever. I I'm here to field any questions, and nothing's off limits. Anything you guys want to talk about? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
What's your name? Where are you from?
I'm from Montreal.
Okay.
And if you guys never read his book, buy the book, find the book, best book.
I looked out front, and they have some books out there, and they don't have it, and I snuck 6 copies in my bag to bring it here, so I have 6. And you can save some postage if you're doing it, salad, probably won't get that, if someone wants to buy a book. Thank you very much. Go,
My
sorry.
question, who called you for the Hall of Fame news? And did you get to have a minute with Vince to talk things over, or that was never part of the weekend?
Yeah, actually, and I divulged it to somebody else, it's not a total secret, but we had a nice reunion a couple years ago in Charlotte. Ray Price put together it. And Flair was there kind of at the last minute because something with Egypt fell through and all of us were going to be there. Ole was there too, plus Barry, and I mean, it just was, we were still meeting fans, and they were trying to set up for the banquet, and they moved us out to the hallway, and it was an exhausting day, but it also was very gratifying to know that the fans, even on short notice, came out those kind of numbers, and you know, you could feel the connection with the fans. 2 years go by, and I don't see Barry in that period of time. And he was, I live in Delaware, he was doing one of these small shows up in New Jersey, and I said, it's an hour drive, I'm specifically going up there to see Barry. So I went up, and he got in, was tired, went to bed, and the next morning I got to see him. We spent about an hour together over in the corner, just him and I. And he was more than talking about his family. I guess Mike just had some health issues, and Barry was hoping to get some help financially from the WWE to get his father better. And you know, that was, he wasn't talking about himself, he was talking about blackjack. And then he said to me, he said, pretty exciting thing later coming up, huh? Kind of nodded, he said, you know what I'm talking about? And he said, well, he said, we're going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And it's going to be Rick, and of course, Arn, Tully, Barry, and me. And he said, and this is what Vince wants. And I mean, I was stunned. And he said, we just can't tell anybody. And so, okay. And of course, I hadn't gotten a call. So I said, well, when did you first hear about it? He said, oh, about 2 months ago. Oh, okay. But he said, I was calling them about my dad about a month ago, and he brought up again. Oh, okay. Well, I kind of was waiting for the phone to ring, and call didn't come, and you know, the business is such that sometimes something sounds like a good idea to somebody one day, and the next day maybe it's not such a good idea. And then Barry, and it was, you know, out on the internet that Barry had either a massive heart attack, a massive stroke. His father was saying, you know, say prayers because, you know, I mean, he may not make it through the day. And so I'm thinking, well, maybe that caused things to be put on hold. I didn't know. And my twins are both freshmen at the University of Delaware, which is about 35 miles from me. And I'm still working full time for the state, and I have off Fridays. So I went up there to pick my daughter up. She wanted to get some clothes, some winter clothes. She moved up from Atlanta, didn't have any heavier clothing. So we're walking around at Kohl's, and she's walking somewhere, and I'm walking somewhere, and my cell phone rings. This is WWE. John Laurinaitis would like to talk to you. Would you hold for a moment? He comes on the phone, and he said, you guys are being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and basically repeated what Barry told me. He said, but you can't say anything to anybody. He said, Flair's under contract to somebody else, probably can't be there. But, and as fate would have it, I had already committed to do Wrestle Reunion in Miami Beach that same weekend, because in my mind, the thought of me doing anything involving WrestleMania was so far from remote, I mean, it just never even entered into my thought pattern. And I said, Josh, well, I got one kind of little problem. I said, I've always been a man of my word, and I've known Sal Parente for many, many years, and you know, he's a very dear friend. And I said, I've signed a contract with you. If I didn't, I gave him my word, and my word is always good. And so, whether contract or no contract, but in this case, you get a contract too. Well, we're having a meeting this week. I'll address it with our legal office and get back to you. And I said, well, this is an incredible honor, I want to tell you, and I don't want anything to get in its way, so I don't know whether it's, you know, it's like I don't have an instant answer to whatever, you know, I didn't know how big a dilemma it really was. Well, I guess I was kind of thinking if he was going to have a meeting that week, that maybe by the end of the week I might hear back from him. Well, 1 week becomes 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It seemed like a long time. Never heard back from him. In fact, to the point that I thought, well, after a while, it had been long enough that if I haven't heard back from him, maybe that's a good thing. At least I think somebody would call me and said, you know, we've got to put it on hold for a while, but, you know, maybe next year, tell me something. And the night they announced it on the live Raw in San Antonio, 6:30, I get a call. It's John Laurinaitis from the building in San Antonio on his cell phone, and he said, we're making it official tonight. And he said, we've got a film clip that's pretty nice, and he said, we'll see, did you get a copy of that? And I thanked him again. And I turned in Raw, and I thought, you know, when I see it on a live telecast, maybe I'll be a little bit closer to thinking, okay, this is really going to happen. And I watched it, and Lawler goes into a break, and he said, right after this break, the first inductee for the Hall of Fame 2012. I said, okay, I can sit through a commercial. And coming out of the commercial, the first inductee for 2012, Edge. Not that he's not deserving, he's really deserving. I was really happy for him. But it was like, oh. And then after the next break, he said, well, before the show's over, we're going to announce the second inductee. So it was like 10:25. Again, another commercial. When we come out, we're going to announce the second inductee. When they came back, they played the video clip, and there we were. And I guess that pretty well made it official. It showed all 5 of us. And I remember going to bed that night, and I woke up out of a sound sleep at like 5 in the morning, because when I'm working, I get up like at 6:15. Woke up at 5 o'clock, and for a few moments, I was just thinking that is this something I dreamed? And then the office called, and they flew all 4 of my children down there because there were 5 of us. They gave us 2 rooms. My son's in a wheelchair. They accommodated him with private vehicles, and you know, basically said, "What do you want? You want something with a lift, you know, power lift, whatever." They were everything they could have done to make it really, you know. And they said, "We want to make this special for you and for your family," and they really did. But everybody was, you know, we all called each other. No one spoke to Barry, because he was in rehab. There was no communication with him, and nobody knew really until we saw him. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if he'd be in a wheelchair, if he would be able to speak. And when I saw him, I was amazed at how far he excuse me.
It's Jimmy Hart.
That's my daughter. Missy, let me call you back, okay? It'll be an hour or so. All right. She doesn't call me that often, so if she does, I know what to do. Anyway, so they really made it special. Again, you read my book, so you know the details of how things ended. And I always felt that, you know, if I was a betting man in Vegas and looking at odds, the odds that, well, first of all, Bret Hart with the screw job in Montreal. And the fact that Vince came down the ringside, a big honker in his face and recorded on TV, and then backstage bumps him in the eye, gave him a black eye. I don't know, that would have been pretty close to my situation, thinking that Bret Hart and Vince would never, ever be in a situation to do business together. But, you know, they were coming out with the Bret Hart story, and Brent saw what happened to the Warrior, and he's very proud of his legacy, so that got he and Vince talking, and so Vince has shown that if he sees business out of a situation, he's willing to put, even the worst situations behind him. In my situation, it's a little different, but I walked in on a Friday afternoon, and the day that my house was finally sold, and I felt that I could leave town. My wife had already flown to Atlanta, rented a house. We were living out of a hotel that week, and hoping that somebody wouldn't figure out what was going on. And I walked in Friday afternoon and told Vince, I came to your house and met you face to face when you hired me. So the day I decided to leave, I believe that same courtesy. So it was I said, if you want to talk about it, fine. If you don't, that's fine too. And oh, absolutely. And of course, it was a one-on-one with him and I that was, pretty intense. And on top of that, Shane was getting married the next day. All of their guests and family were in from out of town, and boy, did I throw a wrinkle into that one. So I don't think I was too popular guy in the McMahon household. Supposedly Linda was in tears, when I ruined their weekend, and they thought I was going to go to New York and be the guy that writes for the Daily News that hates Vince, and which that wasn't what it was about. So all this is in the back of my mind now. This is happening really, and as much excitement as there was with each of us, because again, we didn't know if Flair could even be there, and I was thinking, boy, it's going to be the 11th hour, and if they don't do it, Flair will be there, can't be shown on camera, and it'll be special, but not quite the same. And I thought, boy, they'll wait to the last minute. And to their credit, it was done a few days before, so we knew we were all going to be there. We had told Barry was going to be there, so like everything, all the pieces were falling into place. For me, I had that little thing in the back of my mind. Was this another Bret Hart business decision, maybe, and maybe when I get there, they're doing all this for my family, doing all the right things, but these are people that are in the company and talent relations that don't know the whole story, and maybe I'll get there, but there'll be a chill in the air. Didn't know. So we did a walkthrough early in the day, and when we walked out, Vince was out there with the headset on. He was all business, said hello to everybody, myself included, shook hands with all of us, and positioned everybody, and wanted to just get that all settled. So that kind of helped a little bit. Then they told us that be ready by 7:15, that Vince was going to meet individually with every one of us and present us with our rings. So I was like, oh, wow. So we had to wait outside. They had a row of chairs outside, and he was, had a list that they were calling. And so Flair was sitting out there, and I had 2 seats, and I'm there just thinking through my head, what's this going to be like, and didn't know what to expect. And Stephanie McMahon came along, stopped, talked to Flair, and saw me, came up, was very gracious to me, and I said, gee, Stephanie, I watched you as a real young teenager grow up in front of my eyes, which I did, working out at the house doing all the creative stuff. And I said, now you're a beautiful woman. And she said, yes, and I have children of my own. I had one of the daughters in her hand. So she was very gracious, and that felt good. A minute and a half later, 2 minutes later, here comes Linda McMahon. Same thing, stops with Flair, sees me, comes over. Couldn't have been more gracious. And asked about my children. And so that helped too. And then when we went into the room, they took Flair went first, Arn went second, Tully went third, and I was going in, Barry was last. And as they got their rings, they were waiting in the room. And it was a room maybe half this size. And they had a backdrop, all lit. They had still cameras, video camera, and Vince was standing by himself, and it was, at best, I guess, a semi-private moment. To walk up to him, and boy, it was I was telling Bill before, well, that's hard to, think about it, but I just said to Vince, I said, I don't have the words to thank you. And I said, I can't tell you what it means to me. He looked at me, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, it's a good time, so what a good one. Perfect answer to that situation. Got my ring, tried it on, and Barry came in. Vince, they took pictures with each of us individually as he gave us our ring. And then after Barry got his, all the horsemen came out with their rings, and they were snapping pictures left and right. And then after they took a bunch of pictures, Vince stepped in, and I was kind of towards the middle, and Vince stepped in next to me, and snap, a couple more pictures, and the last one Vince did this. So that's the long version of how it happened. But again, those of you that read my book can really appreciate how that all played out. Yeah. What's your name? Where are you from?
Dave, and I'm from.
All right, that's all right. That's okay.
Yeah, just want to further on that. Were you disappointed at all that Willie Anderson was inducted as part of the original horse?
You know, there was a big controversy right away about that.
JJ, what was the question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Was I disappointed that Ole wasn't, those that being inducted, Ole wasn't a part of it. And I've known Ole since I broke into the business as a full-time wrestler, which was in the Carolinas back real early 70s. And I went in there, my first territory. Ole had been there, went to Minneapolis, and came back in. He was the same then as he is today. I was a little bit older. I was almost months from my 29th birthday when I started full-time in the business. So I had a different outlook. I was a little older. I mean, really appreciated the opportunity and was not going to, let this pass through my fingers. So I always say I wasn't the biggest, I wasn't the best, I wasn't the most talented, but nobody wanted it more than I did, or was willing to work any harder than I was. And back in those days, you didn't have wrestling schools. Getting into the business wasn't easy. And some of the old timers would look at new guys coming in as somebody that was going to take my place. And so they weren't all that anxious, for the most part, to help you. But I don't know, I had a good attitude, I kept my mouth shut, I wanted to learn. And so in time, you win those guys over. And I made a lot of trips with Ole. Ole was always very outspoken. You knew exactly where you stood with him. I regarded him as a friend back then, and I regard him as a friend today. And he's got some serious health issues. Ole was always a very physical guy. He's got MS. It's something that doesn't get better, it only gets worse. And he used to take medications that would give him some relief, and then the window between that and when he would have to do it again kept getting shorter and shorter because the body, I guess, adjusted to it. And I don't know how somebody like that, keeps going. That was a workout for him. I mean, he would go to the car just to show up at the gym, spend 5 minutes just because that was so much a part of his life. At the same time, Ole had stock in the Georgia promotion at one time, and when Vince wanted to get the Superstation and put his programming in there as part of his big plan. I don't know the whole details. I think he talked to the Briscoes, and anyway, Vince got controlling interest of it, and Ole was vocal right from that point that he despised Vince McMahon. Became very public, and Vince had no time for him, and didn't mind saying so. So, for those that don't know, if you look at the big picture, I can understand why, as a decision, that they talk about the WWE Universe. How could you mention Ole's name when Ole obviously didn't care, wouldn't have shown up, couldn't have shown up, and it just wouldn't have worked for a lot of reasons. Luger, Miss Elizabeth was a Hall of Famer, and that situation that happened where Luger and Elizabeth kind of, when I thought about it, made it kind of impossible for them to to honor Luger too. And when you look at Barry, I'm always asked what's my favorite combination of the horsemen. That's always Ole, because he was one of the original horsemen, and if it had to been Ole, maybe none of the rest of it would have ever even happened. And then in terms of the in-ring product from bell to bell, with Barry, there was nobody at that time that I think could compete with us in terms of what we were capable of doing bell to bell. Barry was the son of Blackjack Mulligan, who's a Hall of Famer, so the father-son connection makes sense. Barry worked behind the scenes as an agent for a while. But when you look at it, here's Flair, first guy to be inducted twice. He's being inducted while under contract to a competing organization, which that wouldn't even enter into somebody's thought pattern, let alone saying it, let alone it happened. So that's amazing in and of itself. My situation, I mean, they could have said, we're going to induct, because they want, I think they really wanted to honor Arn. You can see by the reception that he got. He's highly respected there. They really like him. But they could have said, well, Tully and Arn were the Brainbusters, managed by Bobby the Brain Heenan, and they could have inducted them as a tag team into the Hall of Fame. Why he chose 5, including me, I don't know. I wasn't about to ask. I just was thrilled beyond words that it was going to happen. And so I understand from a business perspective why it could have been Ole, why it couldn't have been Luger, why Barry makes sense, because they were a great combination, father-son connection. Vince used to talk about having a magic wand, and if I had a magic wand and it was a perfect world, somehow it would have been Ole and Lex and Barry and then the core of the Horsemen. But we don't live in a perfect world. So it was what it was. I understand why. Most people, if you explain it to them, oh, okay, I kind of see now, I get it. And it's okay. I mean, we like Barry, and it's a great combination. But that's, and I've yet to call Ole, because I don't know he's the kind of guy, I didn't give a damn anyway, that's how he talks, and so it's not like I'm not worried about what he would say. I met with Luger in Miami Beach that weekend. He was at the other Wrestle Reunion show. And I'd heard that he publicly said he was thrilled for us, happy for us. Not a negative word said by him, very gracious. And when I saw him there, I wanted to get up and just talk to him and tell him how, it said a lot about him as a person, because he's had his problems too, and he's hit rock bottom and come back, and for him to be that gracious and very happy for us, deserve to thank you too. So a lot of things about this situation just all fell together, and it just was a blur. There were just so many things, and it was nonstop, and I worked right up until, I worked that Thursday and then got on a plane the next morning with 3 of my kids, and the youngest one was in Atlanta. Like Claire says, divorced 3 times, she's with her mother, and so she flew in and we all met, within an hour of each other, and it was special to me that all my children could all be there, because the young ones came into this world after I retired and really didn't know a whole lot about it, and all of a sudden they're there at this huge show and seeing the outpouring of respect that the industry has for us. And by the end of WrestleMania, my young daughter, she's very athletic. She's a petite little thing. She's 103 pounds, but she runs cross country, swims, and in the marching band. And she said, "Dad, I think I want to be a diva." Up to that point, she was just didn't seem all that interested in the business. So that was kind of amazing to pull me over. Yes, sir. What's your name? Where are you from?
PJ from Toronto.
All right, PJ.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about your job now and how all that work over the years with so many different personalities impacts your job now, and if it does at all.
Well, I work for the Department of Corrections. I was never in the military service, never in law enforcement. And what happened to me was when WCW closed down, I was 59 years old. I worked for Jerry Jarrett for 2 years that had a construction business, and he had some major projects in Atlanta. And I was kind of his representative in Atlanta, and that lasted for 2 years. They built a high school, and they were re-imaging when they changed over all the Anaco to BP. And once that ran its course, he didn't get any new projects and went to some, like 53 people down to 3 people, moved everything back to Tennessee. Now I work again. And that's when I got divorced and didn't know what to do. I actually got a license for real estate, got my license, and I just, hard starting over at that age doing something that, you know, that I can't say I really have a love for it. You have to have a life after wrestling, I know that, and didn't know quite what I wanted to do. And I moved to Delaware. My father passed away, my mother was living by herself, had macular degeneration in one eye, and said, well, you can come here, there's a little house paid for. So I kind of got my life back together. I was there 2 weeks and she got macular degeneration in the other eye, couldn't drive. So I thought, you know, hey, I can go to the grocery store and do a lot of things, and it really helped me, you know, get my life back together. And I, again, tried everything. I was willing to adjust my lifestyle, you know, on the marquee, Burger King, hiring manager, I went to talk to them. They would look at me and they would look at how much money I made, and they would look at me and they'd say, they would never say age because they'd afraid you're suing, and that never comes up. And then I think most of them thought, you know, what should we make here? We think you probably wouldn't be very happy. Don't say it, those words. And I saw an ad in the newspaper for Department of Corrections at a job fair. I went because it's a state job. I passed the test. They interviewed me. People that interviewed me were thrilled to see me there, and I got hired. And I was 61 years old, went through the academy for 9 weeks and had to do everything, and gone through the fire school with the gear on, and you know, all the self-defense stuff. And what's interesting, there were 35 people in our class. Nobody recognized me. Some of them, the next youngest guy was 47, and then there was a couple of them that were like 19. A lot of them weren't even born, and so I actually, the first week we went to a couple of the prisons to like do I don't know what they call it, like an orientation where we wanted to go see where you're being trained to go. Well, walked into the prison and the inmates, J.J. Dillon. And the other guys, my class didn't pick up on it, but the instructors. And I'm getting this double look. They looked at what they're saying. They looked at me. And finally, one called over and said, "You who do they think you are?" And I said, "I don't know who you think I am." Anyway, I said, "It's not a big deal to me." I said, you know, this is kind of a new life for me, and I didn't really want it to be a distraction. If somebody would ask me, I would told them the truth, but then nobody bothered to ask me. And I said, you know, kind of like to keep it that way. So I went through the whole 9 weeks. I was in top cadet class, and at the end, all your classmates pick 2 people to speak at the commencement exercises, and they picked me and another guy, not knowing that. Anyway, so it was a real eye opener because I work inside a prison. I've ridden by, I don't know how many places you see the wall of barbed wire, and if you don't know what goes on the other side, don't want to know because it doesn't impact you. And when you're on the other side, it's like a real, I consider it just another chapter in the story of my life. And it's a whole different culture. These people work very hard. What I did find out, one of the reasons that I had longevity in the profession was I always had respect for the guys in the business. And it went back to my early days. I was a referee for 8 years. When I started to wrestle, I was a baby. So then I was a heel. And then I got a chance to manage. So, and I was a fan when it all started. So being a fan enabled me to be a better referee. I I was a referee for many of Bruno Sammartino's big championship matches. That's where I learned, was being so close in the ring with Bruno Sammartino in these huge arenas in the Northeast. When I wrestled, that experience made me be a better wrestler. And when I managed, I was a better manager because I had done all these things. And I always was interested in the creative side of the business, and I knew that starting late, I couldn't. I mean, how many times could I wrestle Precious Paul Eller in a special attraction match? I mean, that couldn't go on forever. And when I started as a referee, it was Vince Sr. And he was very kind to me, knew me by name, when there was certainly nothing I could ever do for him. That's just the kind of guy he was. And now, here's all these years later, Tully and Arn have left. The glory days of the Horsemen are over. They're up. The Brainbusters with Bobby Heenan, and Tully calls me. It was right when WCW was bought out. And Crockett had been on Rocky. He said, well, I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if you're happy how things are going for you, but Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson are doing all the matchmaking. They're doing 3 tours a night. They've got TV every 3 weeks, 2 syndication shows, 5 pay-per-views, and they need help. And your name's been thrown out, and see what things said about you. If you're interested, you should give him a call. So I called Terry Garvin, who I had known from Amarillo, Kansas City, and he put Pat Patterson on the phone, and ended up, I went to New York around the holidays with my wife to do a little shopping, and then sent a car into Manhattan to get me, took me to his home. Met him, and basically he gave me a job offer, and he said, you can do one of 2 things. I'm meeting with you privately here, so nobody knows about it. I didn't want you to come to the office. And he said, you can make a decision based on the merits of the offer that I made for you. And he said, if you choose to, you can go back there and use me as a bargaining chip to get the best deal that you can if you want to stay there. But I would like an answer. So I started with Vince's father. Here it's gone full circle. Here's Vince Jr. at a time where everybody wanted to be, and I'm being recruited by him. So really it was an easy decision for me to make. But from that point forward, every time that I had to deal with talent, I always in the back of my mind knew that I had been in their shoes. And when you have to deliver bad news sometimes, it's not easy to do. But if you're thinking, how would I want to be told? And one of the things that I did, they used to send a FedEx letter to the guy's house. Basically that your contract is, it's 90 days, it's not being renewed, or whatever it was. And I signed those letters, but before any of them went out, I made a personal phone call. And I said, these are the tough calls that I got to make. But I said, the letter's coming, and I'm giving you a heads up because that'll give you some time to think about how you want to address it with your wife and your family to kind of lay the groundwork for it, so you don't get surprised when the doorbell rings. And I think guys understood and made my job easier because I respected them in a way that I would want to be respected. So when it was over and I got a job at the Department of Correction, same thing. Just like in the wrestling profession, you get respect by giving respect. And that's what I did from day one. I called everybody Mr. So-and-so, kids, older people, officers, inmates, and I've been there, January's 8 years. And my kids in college and economy tanked. I got great benefits, and they look after me without looking after me. It's a union thing, but so I'm going to hang in there and keep going a little bit longer. But I had one thing when I was a young guy, and he was a fan. He would follow magazines and stuff. He came up to me one day, a young kid, and looked at me. He said, he said, I think I have to take you. And I said, stop and think about this for a minute. I said, if you whoop my butt, you kick the ass of an old man, so how really tough are you? I said, but on the other hand, if by chance I come out on top and now you got your ass kicked by an old man, you're in a no-win situation, so why don't you and I just forget we had this conversation? You got to take that with his mom. He laughed. But again, you get respect for giving. never had a bad situation there, and because I think I handled everyone in the best way possible. Yes, sir.
My name is Steve. I'm from Dillon, Ontario. I just wondered what your responsibilities would be in charge of, what was it like on a pay-per-view night or something like that?
JJ, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, he was asking what were my duties when I first went to what was then the WWF. And again, that's such a smart man. Because I had come from the other side, guys in the business, it's not like the Yankees, Red Sox. Maybe you guys they hate the other guys because of the uniform they have on, but there's always a pride factor. You know, wherever you're working, you want where you are to be the best. And one guy that surprised me, Andre the Giant. Here's a guy, when he would come to the territories, I would take him in my kind of big stretch van. He could lay out and sleep. I'd bring him over to my house and give him a home-cooked meal. And he said to Vince, "What's he doing here? He's from the other side. You need him?" And Vince, not to hurt my feelings, but told me. So he said, "I don't want to thrust you into a situation of huge responsibility where you're going to get a lot of attention on yourself." He said, "We're going to make this very gradual." And little by little, I took over duties, and this was before, you know, the contracts were just starting. They were a basic contract. So I got in on that, got in on the hiring. Pat left for a while, and that was something that I elevated my responsibilities and owning the basic payroll for all live events and pay-per-views, which Vince always has the final say on that, of course. But somebody has to do a preliminary thing and give them some numbers to look at and work with. I was involved with all talent travel, which I had done at WCW, because I knew the mindset. The office wanted guys there early, so there was always a backup in case there was mechanical, weather, all the things that could go wrong. They didn't want a house show sitting somewhere and the talent had been on a flight that something happened and couldn't get there for the show. So I wasn't always the most popular guy with the flip, but I always had that in mind, and I would position, you know, towns, and I would try to find a hub in the middle where they could fly in there one time and kind of go like the spokes on a wheel. And I would meet with travel, and I would make the decisions about where the guys flew to and what flights they were on. But that's what I'd always done, and it just came second nature to me. So little by little by little by little, and I kind of, Bruce Pritchard came in and got more involved with the creative, and I kind of got more in the actual nuts and bolts of the talent relations side towards the end. Yes, sir.
Hi, this is Frank from Montreal. How will you describe the art of being a good manager?
Oh, that's a good question. I always say Bobby the Brain Heenan is the greatest manager ever. He set the bar by which all the rest of us are measured. Somebody pointed out, you know, the big fans of Bobby mine, and his style was different than mine. Bobby was very entertaining, over the top, and I was always kind of like Mr. Businessman, and I mean, that was just my approach. Jimmy, very successful too, running around with a megaphone. It's just like there's no, just like Eddie Graham wrestling, Tennessee wrestling, there is no right or wrong. It's, you know, what works for you. And back in the day, you had more diverse, bizarre characters in the business too, it seemed. You know, whether it was the Mongolian Stomper that I started with, or the Butcher, the original Sheik. These were guys really that, if they spoke, it kind of dispelled the aura around them. So the manager played a very important function, because aside from what he might do at the edge of the ring, he was also the one that was forwarding the storylines and played an important role. But nowadays, when you look at the talent mix now, you don't have the bizarre, diverse characters that you did back in the day. And that's one of the things about the current product, that there's kind of a sameness. And Vince was always high on the Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, the Lex Luger, you know, that body. I mean, he had a vision of what he thought a wrestler should look like and what he thought a wrestling match should be like. And Pat Patterson was a genius of figuring out what Vince's likes were, and he would filter through everything, and the things that he knew Vince would like, he would beat it to him like a shovel. And they made an excellent combination. Pat Patterson is one of the greatest minds I've ever worked with, and has a lot to do with it. His concept for the Royal Rumble when it started. So, I don't know where I went with that question. I hope I answered it. The managers, yeah, it's changed. And then they went with the way of the female ballet, and then Miss Elizabeth and Sherry Hortels. You had female managers, and the male managers just fell by the wayside. And even in the small independent promotions, you know, when money gets tight, and the promoter's looking at who he has on the roster, well, here's this guy, and I need the other guy over here because you got to have an opponent to work with. But boy, if I got to cut back somewhere, I need the referee. I need to referee all the matches. But if I had to start somewhere, I don't have to have that manager. And so a lot of guys tried to justify by what they did, you know, drawing attention to themselves. You know, well, they really need me. You know, and I was always very lucky. Had a storybook career, always the right place at the right time, and never felt a need to focus attention on me. And whether that, not that I'm the most self-confident guy in the world, but it's like it just took care of itself. I didn't have to go out every night and show how important I was. You know, I think it kind of spoke for itself over time. Yes, sir.
Jeremy from Oshawa, and I was wondering your thoughts on the very first war games.
Well, you would have to bring that up. Why? You know, it was a great concept. They were always looking for something new that we could do, and at the WrestleMania Hall of Fame thing, Dusty and Arn were talking about every one of those war games. Arn was always the first guy in, and we count the minutes to get everybody in there. And there's Arn and Dusty now, all the bodies in there over in the corner. Let's stay out of the way here. You know, somebody going to get hurt. Well, somebody get hurt with me. And it was the first war games. You know, 2 rings together with a cage around everything, and then a cage across the top. And I remember Animal sliding under me up on his shoulders, and all of a sudden I look, and there's Hawk on the top turnbuckle with his neck down like this because that cage is low. And I'm thinking, oh, brother, this doesn't look good for me. And I'm trying to get down out of that position, and as powerful as Animal was, he kind of lost me, and down I come at the last second. I turned my head, thinking I might break my neck and bury my shoulder. It was the worst injury that I ever had. It was off 6 weeks. Didn't break it, but separated it. And I have a hump up here because I could have got it surgically fixed, or just you immobilize it and everything kind of comes back. But I can't throw a baseball straight anymore. I used to be able to, and I throw it was over there someplace. So it kind of messes up that alignment. But it demonstrated without planning it that way that the war games were very violent. And I think that set the tone for all the rest of the war games, that they knew that they were going to be bad. And I had shown them from the get-go. But when they imploded the Omni and that thing came down in a pile of rubble, if there was only one person with a glass of champagne toasting it, it was me. I was happy to see that building come down because I didn't have very good memories. Yes, sir.
You've probably seen
Which name were you
Marty
from?
from Toronto.
Okay.
You've probably seen all of the wrestlers in the original, but is there any particular couple of wrestlers for you that you thought should have been really made? They really screwed them up in terms of how they set them up and different programs. Maybe if you saw something, you might have said something and got them into different programs, or maybe would have been bigger.
That's a great question, and I have found that in recent years I've kind of drifted away from the business. I'm just appraised what an awesome event WrestleMania was, but there are weeks I watch the TV show and it's very difficult for me to watch. And if I come by and I see a William Regal or Fit Finlay or some guys that I've known that perform, and you saw it with Undertaker and Triple H with Shawn Michaels, which Holly and I talked after. For us, maybe one of the greatest matches that I've ever seen. That's how good it was. It was all the subtleties, all the innuendos, the looks, everything that they did, even the way it ended with not knowing for sure what would happen. And there's Shawn Michaels down next to his friend who just got beat. And you could see the welts on the Undertaker's back from those chair shots. And he walked around, did his pose, and then went over and one on one side, one on the other, picked him up. And it was like, three cripples all helping each other out. What a perfect way to end that match. And if you were watching, you understood, again, kind of like the Horseman philosophy, that they left everything they had out there. It was a war. And that's about as old school as you get. So I can watch a match like that and like going back in time, be on the edge of my chair with the false finishes and things that happen. It's like, oh, wow. So it's still there. Some guys got it. Some of the young guys, I think, maybe haven't figured it out yet. They look at some of us as dinosaurs. And I think Arn gets a little of that. He said one of his frustrating things is he sets a match up and then he sits there with his injuries and sees something go wrong in the match and realizes that all those years ago, if he was in the ring, he had the ability to be able to fix the situation. And these guys, when something doesn't go right, don't know how to fix it. And that can be very frustrating. But and I saw something where the big guy that dances came out there and he was on for a couple of weeks with the girls in a big production, and then I heard that he wasn't on because Vince said that he thought he wasn't ready. He was dangerous, going to hurt somebody. Well, years ago, again, the guy wouldn't have been out there until they knew that he was ready. And so that's kind of unheard of too. But the business has changed. The lack of talent depth has forced them to have to make decisions like that. And the other thing is, if you're involved in the business, and anybody in here that's been on the inside will know it's a 24/7 job. Vince McMahon used to have a notepad and pencil by his bed. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, think of something, and then write it down for fear that in the morning he would forget about it. And that's how it is. It consumes your life. And I'm at the age now where I don't have that energy level to do that. So if somebody says, well, if you offer a job, you go back. It's very flattering to think that somebody might do that, but I'm very proud of my legacy and what I accomplished. And I would never go back just to pick up a paycheck, knowing that you have to be committed 24/7 to do the job. And I'm not capable of doing that anymore. So I'm not really the right one to pass judgment on decisions that are made with some of these guys. But I can look and know how tough a job it is. And here's Vince McMahon. In the day, bookers would last for a while. They'd have a shelf life for so long, and then they'd get wore out, and they'd get replaced, and somebody would come in from another territory and bring their crew in. Vince has been the final say. This is what, WrestleMania 28, and he's still the guy with the final say. So I have to give him his due. Now, has he made mistakes? Yes. But somebody has to be, like the President of the United States, they said, the buck stops here. And that's kind of how it is with what is perceived as being the biggest wrestling company in the world. Vince makes the decisions, good or bad, and again, you cannot argue with success. Yes, sir.
I think like in NWA, had it not been for Magnum TA's car accident, he was the verge of Ric Flair started at 86, and they're about to set up a rivalry between them, and after he had his accident, they turned Nikita Koloff face to take his place there. It's unfortunate end to a career there.
Yeah, something like that happens unexpected. When it's week to week episodic television, and you take a key player like that who was so talented that just is gone. And then there's the personal side of it. We all had so much respect for him and admired him. And we heard he was in bad shape, and Doug Dillinger was retired cop, and he was in charge of security. And one night, like 1 o'clock in the morning, they snuck us in the back door of the hospital and up the stairway, and you there's a guy laying face down on a machine with the things around his head, so he was totally immobilizing his machines, and then shift the other way so the body fluids, would settle. And boy, you're thinking, God, I hope he makes it, but every night when we get in the car to go somewhere, we're at risk that could happen to us too. And that's just was a tragic thing. He's got quality of life, that's a good thing, but who knows where his career would have taken him. Very talented kid.
JJ, one question that as many years, I've known you for forever, so to say. There's one thing I don't know about you. Who gave you the name JJ Dillon? Where did that come from?
I've been dropped on my head too many times and I don't really know. I remember when I first started, everybody wants to be what they're not. I thought I wanted to be a cowboy. I had a Western hat, I had some things. And it was at a time when Gunsmoke with Matt Dillon was an extremely popular television show. And I remember I announced myself from Provo, Utah, because I thought that was a neat place. Never been there and didn't know where it was. And I started as Jim Dillon, and then when I started managing, it was Red Mastine that says, well, you're like you're a businessman now, and Jim Dillon just, you need to be James. You need a middle initial. So, okay, I'm James J. And then I get asked what the J stands for, and Jerry Prater used to ghostwrite a column in the Florida program. And he used to refer to me, because I was kind of arrogant, he called me James Julius Caesar Dillon. So I said, well, that's what the other J stands for, is Julius. And so that's how I got that name. But I do have a niece, her little name is Dillon, but I don't, that's just happened to be that way. I really think it had to do with the Gunsmoke thing, and that's probably where I picked that. Because I got some old programs from Cobo Hall with Jim Morrison, when I first worked some dates there, and then it became Jim Dillon, something like that.
So your trivia question, who's the one on that show that used to yell out, Mr. Dillon? What was his name?
Yeah, it was...
Anybody know?
Fester, was it Fester?
Chester, and who played him?
Festus, that's right.
No, it was Chester and his Dennis Weaver.
Dennis Weaver,
I don't
yes.
believe I remember that.
Used to be trivia, huh?
Yeah, I don't remember. I never knew where J.J. Dillon came from. That's all the years I've known you.
Yes.
I read just recently that early on in your wrestling career, you started out mainly in Canadian Maritimes. Just wondering if you had any fond memories of your time in Canada long ago.
I have great memories of Canada. I started in the Carolinas, and like I said, a lot of help, because they elevated me a couple of places. They put me with big boy Luke Brown, that was one of the original Kentuckians, big guy, little guy, and we worked some main events in some of the smaller towns. Johnny Weaver took a liking to him, was great to me, worked in the office. Art Nelson, an old timer, and the Cormier family used to promote the Canadian Maritimes in the summer months in hockey arenas when the ice wasn't down. And then the winter months when they were playing hockey, they would come to the Carolinas. So they developed a friendship with Johnny Weaver. Johnny Weaver would go up there for like a week at a time and be treated as a big star coming in. So I'd been there about a year and a half. Weaver was due to go up there the closing week of the season, and somebody got hurt in the Carolinas, and he wasn't booked because he was booked to go up there, and felt responsibility to the Crockett to stay there and be the fill-in for a main event guy that got hurt. So he picked me to go up there in his place, and just again, right place, the right time, luck, made a good impression on him, and they invited me to come back the following season as a tag team wrestler. And I remember going back to Jim Crockett Sr., who gave me the money to get the airline ticket to go up there to reimburse me, and I came back and paid him. And I said, Mr. Crockett, I want to give you a year notice that I'd like to leave next year, and which that was unheard of. It was a 3-week notice. I gave him a year notice. He said, well, I'm happy for you that they want you up there, and you can go knowing that the door's always open for you to come back here. And of course, he passed away that year. But when I was going up there, figured in to be a tag team wrestler, and I think it was Stan Stasiak who was penciled in to be their top heel that year. And a couple weeks before the season opened, Stasiak got a call from Vince Sr. with a spot in New York. And nobody could fault him again for standing in his way, and now it creates a void. And I was with Leo Burke, who was working down in the Carolinas and making, so many things happen, talking wrestling in the car. And I said, Leo, you had the Stomper, you had Killer Carl Crew, you had all these monster heels. What if you changed the pattern and had a smart-ass wrestling heel instead of in a tag team? And I said, let me call Rudy. Rudy was his older brother, was running things. And a couple of days went by and he said, Rudy likes the idea, but he said, you need to drink a 6-pack of beer every night, put on a little bit more weight, you're kind of skinny, and that's how I got my break. That summer I made more money in the Canadian Maritimes that summer, and that was my break in the business as a heel. So I have very fond memories of the Canadian Maritimes, of the Canadian people. It's where I got my break in the business, the Cormier family. Leo Burke came to Cauliflower Alley 2 years ago and spent some time with him, and so I love Canada.
JJ, thank you so very much. Let's stand up and show appreciation to this WWE Hall of Famer, J.J. Dillon.
Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it.